Hey, welcome to the Lowdown newsletter. We talk everything aviation defense. It has been a busy couple weeks, and unfortunately, we've been more or less off focused on the podcast in particular. Now we're playing catch up with the Lowdown newsletter, so we're going to do some of that catch up today. There's a lot that's going on in aviation defense. If you are a Lowdown newsletter subscriber, you'll note that the thread of the day and the history of the day, we've moved those towards the bottom of the newsletter. Minor detail, but nonetheless, it is a detail. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you click the link down below. You can subscribe. It's absolutely free. Won't spam you. Clearly an indication of the fact that I haven't sent a newsletter in about 2.5, 3 weeks. So yeah, you don't have to worry about spam. You just get great little nugget bombs that are delivered to your inbox every so often and stay in touch with what's going on with the newsletter, what's going on in the world in aviation defense. So General Kane, you might have heard his podcast episode we released back in January. We actually recorded it on the 30th of November. That's been a question a lot of people have asked. And that was the week before he was retiring from the Central Intelligence Agency, or retiring from the Air Force in his role at the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, in February, President Trump nominated him to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So yesterday, or April 1st, he sat in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee testifying. Most likely he'll be confirmed. Supposedly that's what everyone is saying. It seems logical. Now, he'll require a couple waivers to do this. This is nothing new. Secretary Austin as well as Secretary Mattis both required waivers as well, so I would not foresee it. His waivers, at least one of them in particular, is for not having served as a chief of staff of a service, as well as not having served as a combatant commander. So you got to do one or two of those in order to be a chairman or be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he'll require a waiver for that, and then it'll be a promotion to a 4-star general. But enjoy chatting with him on the podcast. I think you'll really enjoy his episode. A lot of salient points and just a great story in general. So make sure you check out his podcast episode if you're interested in podcast things. So there you go. All right, over to the flight line. B-2s. This is our strategic bomber. When that one shows up at your front door, it should get your attention. So, and President Trump's sending a pretty clear message to Iran. At least I think so. Satellite imagery is showing at least 6 B-2s that are sitting on the ramp at Diego Garcia. This is a little island out in the middle of the Indian Ocean that we've utilized for Middle East operations for decades. There are hardened shelters there, so maybe there are more bombers hiding in those shelters, but these are the ones that are sitting on the ramp. This is on the heels of President Trump telling Iran, you must come to the table within 2 months to talk about your nuclear program and the nuclear deal. So a lot happening there. This shortens the distance. If you're over watching on YouTube, we got a little map there. 3,200 miles or so from Diego Garcia to Tehran. This definitely cuts the distance down from Whiteman Air Force Base in the middle of Missouri, where the B-2 is stationed. That would have to transit quite a long distance in order to get there. So we're shaving the distance down over half the distance by positioning those bombers at, the front doorstep, with air quotes, of the Middle East there. Additionally, satellite imagery has shown the carrier strike group, with the USS Carl S. Vincent, is making haste to the Middle East. So a lot of iron is flowing back to the Middle East. So it's a pretty clear signal. I would not want the B-2 showing up at my doorstep. Now, the Air Force in the United States has 20 B-2 bombers. We'll talk about what happened to number 21 later in the podcast. But first, Maryland has retired the first A-10. This has been talked about on the podcast or the newsletter before. The 170th Fighter Wing out of Maryland is a guard unit that has the A-10. They're being divested. Now, a deal was struck at the end of President Biden's administration, December-January timeframe, to reallocate DC, the 121st Fighter Squadron out of DC to Maryland. And so Maryland would divest the A-10s. They would no longer be transitioning to a cyber or an intel mission, I forget which one they were going to do. And they would take the 121st Fighter Squadron F-16s out of DC and make those part of Maryland Air National Guard. And I think initial plan was, hey, they would just stay put, basically just be wearing a Maryland hat as they sit there right there in DC. Again, this is like a postage stamp of where we're not moving iron from DC to Idaho, some kind of strategic East Coast versus West Coast or anything like that. This is, really just a shell game of money. In return, DC would be able to repurpose the area around the RFK Stadium. So a very non-traditional deal, or maybe a traditional deal, depending on how you look at politics in DC. So the White House, in an unsigned email this week, said that move is not going to happen. So Maryland is going to divest its A-10s. It's going to transition to some other non-flying mission, most likely, unless that changes. DC is going to keep its F-16s. Kind of a shell game when you're talking about moving this iron around, basically just between state guard units so they can keep flying missions, etc. All right, over to the F-47. That was announced last week, and we did a video on it diving into a little bit further of NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance Fighter. We've talked about this on the newsletter. It's been back and forth. Knock it on, knock it off, knock it on, knock it off. And a lot of that becomes from the fact that this is going to be the most exquisite and most expensive plane that the United States will ever procure until the next one, I guess. It is there to be the 6th generation fighter. Again, we talked about what generations mean in the video that's linked in the newsletter. But we have to get this one right because you can't make the most expensive plane and not address the threat. And I think that's where a lot of the pausing came from, because what is the next threat? Can this plane be adapted quickly to address a new and emerging threat? All the drone warfare that has taken place in the last few years with Ukraine, I think, has really shown how the battle space is changing. And that's really at a tactical level. But then if we're looking at hypersonic weapons, all these different things, the battle space is different. So you can't go buy, this one exquisite piece of iron and take 15 years to develop and get it on the flight line and then it not address the problem you need. In fact, the next article talks about Secretary Kendall, who is the former Chief of Staff of the Air Force that left January 20th, that he actually excluded it from the FY26 budget. And that's the NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance Fighter, which is going to be the F-47, because he was focusing more on base defense and counter space operations, because if planes can't get off the base, if they can't take off, then what's the point? There are a lot of problem sets that are going on here that have to be solved, and it's not an easy one. But the F-47, we talked about it in the video, so you can take a look there. If you got questions, comments, concerns, throw those down below. We can maybe dig into it a little bit further. All right, the Air Force is at an all-time low when it comes to readiness rates, dropping year over year. In 2022, the readiness rate, and that's the plane's ability to go out there and fight, and this now encompasses crew availability, crew training, some other things, but really kind of focusing on the iron piece of it, has dropped from 71% to 69% to now 67% in 2024. I think here it's important to highlight that if we look at the increase of the average age of our iron, the planes, has gone from 17 years old to 32 years old in 2024. So the planes are almost double in age. So we're not buying a bunch of new planes, albeit we're buying the new F-35, we're buying KC-46s. We're still relying a lot on old planes to get the job done, doing more with less. Anecdotal, I would think that and say that our operations tempo is higher and we're addressing more and having to do more with less. The cliche saying there, we can see that the readiness rates keep dropping. The F-35 is still struggling as we're working through all the kinks to get that up to a higher mission capability rate. It was 51% in 2023. So we're still looking. We've used Army Sergeant that's been charged with spying. This is yet another one that was charged with selling, or he was allegedly selling encrypted laptops and hard drives to Chinese government officials and expressed an intent to move to China. So he's been arrested. This also comes with additional 2 other soldiers being charged in separate cases, passing Army technical manuals to the Chinese as well. So there have been multiple ones. I need to go back and look. If you just go off the top of my head, there's been a lot of these over the last year and a half or so. All right, this is a bit of an older article, but I think it hasn't made it to the mainstream. On March 9th, Russian special operations soldiers infiltrated Ukrainian positions behind enemy lines, if you will. And they did this by covert movement through a unused gas pipeline. So they transitioned 15 kilometers in this pipeline and then conducted, cross-border operations. And then it's been interesting too to see on X, like these Russian doctors are posting x-rays before and after of these troops' lungs, which I don't know why, one, you would publish them or what they're showcasing. I don't know what the intent is. I don't speak Russian. I'm not a doctor. Going through a gas pipeline definitely seems like that's going to cause some health problems. But now I keep seeing these x-rays of these soldiers that went through. So you sent your soldiers and then shockingly they have lung issues. It's weird. But someone smarter than myself probably has what the propaganda play here is. And I haven't figured it out. All right, the U.S. is operating a $15 million bounty for 3 Chinese citizens who are accused of conspiring to export U.S. drone technology through Hong Kong and China into the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. So getting this drone technology into Iran's hands. And as we've seen, there's also been a lot of drone attacks that have come from the Houthis, which have been backed by Iran. That technology has made it into the fight in Ukraine. the real threat with ballistic missile systems is out there as well. So remember that conversation we had about the airframe age? The Air Mobility Commander is now talking about another service life extension program that's called SLEP, and that's when we take, hey, the F-16 is meant for 4,000 hours, and we SLEP that out to 8,000 hours. So do a bunch of work on the plane to extend it there. Now talking about extending the KC-135 out into 2050s, which is wild. Just like the B-52, a lot of these tails will be approaching 100 years of age by the time they retire if this plan is executed the way they're talking about it. So think about it, 100 years old. Like driving a 100-year-old car seems spicy, let alone flying one through the air. Now the 135 has gone through a lot of upgrades, from re-engineing, new avionics, and reskinning. I am curious. I'm obviously not a 135 guy, very appreciative of 135s, but their Block 45 upgrade, I keep seeing memes out there with a lot of autopilot issues, like not being able to use the autopilot below 10,000 feet, etc. I don't know if that's true or not, but again, yet another problem set that has to be overcome. So if you're a 135 guy, chime in, educate me on that one. Again, another little promotion here. If you can call it the SEED series, the Suppression of Enemy Air Defense series, make sure you check that out over on YouTube, wherever your podcast. Flash has done a great job. Really interesting to hear from Vietnam to modern day what's going on. We have 2 more episodes that are in the queue for the Wild Weasel mission. All right, history of the day. That B-2 picture we saw at the beginning from 21 to 20, how'd that happen? Well, on February 23rd, 2008, we lost a B-2 at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. And this all resulted from moisture intrusion into an air data sensor, which led to the plane losing control on takeoff. Now, the B-2 cost $1.4 billion, I guess, depending upon how you count the money, but it's a very expensive plane. So we can just take a quick look here at this crash. And again, if you're listening, I have the video linked there in the newsletter. Obviously, people out there watching this thing go, because when you see a B-2, you don't get to see a B-2 flying around too often. If you haven't seen a B-2 fly around, it's a pretty impressive thing when you see the bat wing just show up overhead. But as you can see, as it went to rotate, take off, not working so much, and rolls as its left wing catches the ground. Both crew members make the smart call to eject there. This was obviously a complete loss of the B-2. But on that note, there's only one variant of the B-2, and that's the B-2A. We have 20 of these, originally purchased 21. I forget what the actual number was, but again, this is one of those systems like, hey, we want to purchase 40 or we want to purchase 80, and we end up only buying 20 of these aircraft. It first debuted in Kosovo in 1999, flying from Missouri to Serbia and back, all in one. If you talk to B-2 guys, I fly with them now on my day job. It's always impressive. Like, oh, my longest sortie was 37 hours. Like, jab a pin in my eye. No, thank you. It is impressive you're able to do that. Now, this will eventually be replaced by the B-21 Raider, which again will be that 6th generation aircraft complement that we could dive into further. So hope you enjoyed the Lowdown newsletter. Make sure you are subscribing and get that link down below, and I'll see you next time.